The following is a presentation from Creation Today Ministries and is made possible by the faithful support from our creation partners. To them, we say thank you. To learn how you can become a Creation Today partner, visit us at creationtoday.org.
Tonight, I want to talk about Starlight because if I were an atheist, if Eric Hovind was an evolutionist, if Eric Hovind rejected the truth of the Bible, the number one argument I would throw in people's face over and over and over who said, well, I believe God created the heavens and the earth, I'd say there's no way, because we see starlight that is millions of light years away, and your book teaches this idea that God created the heavens and the earth. I do not buy it. I do not believe it. There's no way God's word can be true because the universe says otherwise. Well, coming on to discuss that conversation about what I would say if I were an atheist is my friend David Rives. He runs David Rives Ministries. I'm so glad he's here. David, thanks for joining me tonight.
Thank you, Eric, for having me. It's great to be here.
You have produced a huge number of conversations with experts. You are the host of Creation in the 21st Century. You have multiple telescopes, including one that you have to trailer around because you take phenomenal photos of space. So I'm jealous already of some of the astronomy that you've done. What do you think about this whole starlight issue? If I was an atheist, if I didn't believe in God, I think I would throw that in people's face all the time. Do you have a thought on this?
Yeah, well, first of all, if you were an atheist, I would tell you, get with the program. This has all the answers. And also, I would tell you, listen, you're appealing to the supernatural, Mr. Atheist, in believing that you don't have a starlight time issue, because you actually do.
Whoa, okay, this sounds like we're going to have an interesting conversation here. If I'm the one with the problem, and I'm thinking you're the one with the problem, and a lot of times this is what happens, we go back and forth. But David, most Christians don't even realize it's the atheist that does have the problem. Save that for me for just a minute. How do we as Christians reconcile, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, on day 3 of creation, on day 4 of creation, God making the sun, moon, and stars, and it's just like, hey, He made the stars also, like it was no big deal. Isaiah says He knows them by name. How do we reconcile this happening less than 10,000 years ago with the fact that we can see light millions of light years away? Current scientists would say at 13.8, right, billion light years is the known age of the universe based on starlight. So how do you tackle this, and what kind of answers do creationists give to this problem?
Well, there's actually several different solutions to this problem. And if maybe I could kind of go over the facts to start with, because I think it's important that we hit on the facts. I made a couple of notes. We need to remember that God created time in the beginning. He's outside of time, Eric. Okay? He doesn't need time. He created time for us to live in. So time's meaningless to Him. That's number one. He created it in the very beginning, first verse of the Bible. Number two, He created matter to fashion a universe that declares His glory. So if you think about it, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. That's the origin of time, space, and matter right there. The matter was created so that He could create the earth and then the entire universe. A lot of people say, well, the universe is so huge, it doesn't need to be so huge. Why did God create this massive universe and then tiny little us? And what's the point of it all? You have to remember, I think that it's spelled out in 2 different verses in the Bible. Psalm 19:1 says that the heavens declare the glory of God. It says that the firmament shows His handiwork. It says that day unto day utters speech, night after night shows knowledge, but there's no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. It's almost as if God's saying the heavens are screaming out. They actually have a language that is declaring His glory. Is that their purpose? Well, yeah, it's to declare his glory, to be for signs, for seasons, for days, and for years, and to give light upon the earth. That's what the Bible says. But the earth, that's an entirely different story. And we know it's an entirely different story because of what we read in Isaiah 45. Isaiah 45 says, "Thus saith the Lord, God himself, who formed the earth and made it. He established it. He created it not in vain. He formed it to be inhabited." Okay, so the heavens he formed to declare his glory. The earth he formed for us to live on. He's outside of time. He created time for us. But we know from the biblical description, from Genesis 1, he created light on day one. And that's a mystery to a lot of people because, wait, he created light on day one and then he created the sun 4 days later? Well,
That's
what
true.
was light? All right, well, he created stars on day 4, including the sun, and he created the moon on day 4. But I believe, and I know that my Christian colleagues probably have a lot of debate about this, but I believe that when we say God created light, let there be light, that was the physics that govern light. That was light itself. And those physics that govern light, then he put those to work on day 4 when he created the stars. Okay.
Now that's interesting. Let me just pause right there. So, because most people have a hard time with this concept of you can actually have light without a source for the light. Hit that real quick.
Yeah, that you can have light, because think about it, Eric. Light is not just light, like visible spectrum of light. Light is the electromagnetic spectrum. Okay, it's a mystery still today for physicists because we look at it and we see, okay, well, light is a wave. Oh, wait, no. Light is a particle. It's a photon coming towards us. Oh, wait, no. What is light? Nobody understands light. And that, because it's a mystery, well, how do we look at it? So when you look at the electromagnetic spectrum, you see that you've got microwaves, you've got the waves that makes our cell phones work. You've got listen, we rely on this all the time.
Yeah.
You have millimeter wave scanners at airports. Listen, I like to get people when I go through airports because I'll usually say, hey, I'm going to opt out of the millimeter wave. And they're always like, oh, okay, well, we'll take you through the metal detector. You'll have to get a pat down or whatever. And they were like, but you understand this is perfectly safe, right? It's a millimeter wave. I say, yeah, millimeter wave, that's a microwave. And they were like, the what? A millimeter wave. Look it up in the dictionary. It's microwave. You want to microwave me? Go ahead, right? And they're like, no, that's not micro. Truthfully, the millimeter wave machines that we all go in at the airport, we hold our hands up and all that, millimeter wave falls in the exact area of the spectrum, of the electromagnetic spectrum, as microwaves.
So that's how I heat up my food. So stand in there a few times and I'm going to warm up. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, you go through there enough hundreds of times and it gently adds up. So anyway, light is a mystery because we still don't understand it. But a straightforward chronology of the Bible says that we came about 6,000 years ago, okay? Atheists say, oh no, well, the universe is about 14 billion years old. Biblical history indicates that stars were created just 4 days after the beginning of creation. But Big Bang physicists claim that the stars were coalesced from compressed matter over billions and billions of years. All right, so what do we got going on here? Well, a light year basically is a measurement of distance. A light year is not time. Generally speaking, a lot of people say that a light year is about 6 trillion miles. But 1 light year is the distance that light would travel after an entire year is up here on Earth. Well, in standard physics, we state that generally light travels at about 186,000 miles per second, 12 million miles a minute in general. Okay, but is that really the way it works? Again, it's a distance, it's not a measurement of time. And a lot of stars in the universe are estimated to be millions or billions of light years away. So theoretically, this means that it would take billions of years for us to be able to see light from the most distant galaxy all the way back to Earth. So if biblical chronology is correct, 6,000 years, how could we possibly see any star beyond 6,000 light years away? Now, our closest star, here's the problem. It's a lot greater than the 6,000 years. The atheist will always say, well, how do you get starlight in 6,000 years? Oh, no, it's a lot greater than that. because our closest star, Alpha Centauri, Proxima Centauri, is about 4.3 light years away. Well, God created the sun, moon, and stars to be for signs, seasons, days, and years, and to give light upon the earth. 2 days later, when Adam was created, if he did not see Proxima Centauri, then it wouldn't be fulfilling its function. If he didn't see the Milky Way, then they wouldn't be fulfilling their function. If he couldn't see Andromeda Galaxy, it wouldn't be fulfilling its function to bring light to the earth. So actually, you have to get the light here, not just in 6,000 years, but in a matter of 2 days, all the light from the universe.
So the problem's even worse than we described.
It sounds really bad, doesn't it?
It does. It's like, wait, you got to get light from the stars to planet Earth for man to see them within 2 days, probably the same day if you think about it, but literally within 2 days for Adam to see that. It's not a 6,000-year problem, it's a 2-day problem.
Correct. It's a 2-day problem. Now, I visualized it on a little graphic here. You see the blue ring, that is 6,000 light years in any direction from the Earth, okay? So 6,000 light years radius, that's about 12,000 light years diameter. That's the space that we have to work with. We can see stars within that diameter, but how in the world could we see any star or the galaxies that you see beyond that ring? And I mean, this is just as much of a problem for the atheistic community as it is for me and my Christian colleagues. Because, all right, so here's what is so intriguing. It's an appeal to the supernatural. It's called the horizon problem. And this is a quote from NASA. I'm just going to read it here because this is directly from NASA's website. The horizon problem means that distant regions of space in opposite directions of the sky are so far apart, assuming standard Big Bang expansion, that they could never have been in casual contact with each other because the light travel time between them exceeds the age of the universe. And we're talking about 26 plus billion years from light years from this galaxy on this far reach of the cosmos to this galaxy on this far reach of the cosmos. Okay, well, they say that the universe has only been around for about 14 billion years, but we've got a 26 plus billion year diameter, light year diameter of the universe. Huge problem. Well, what do? They invent magic. They invent magic called inflation. Now, inflation basically states that during the first few nanoseconds, femtoseconds, whatever you want to call it, after the Big Bang, the universe expanded faster than the speed of light. Within a few seconds or nanoseconds, almost to its current size. And then, guess what, Eric? It magically slowed down. How did it slow down? Oh, we don't have any idea. What started this magical expansion faster than the speed of light right after the Big Bang? Oh, well, we have no idea. What physics would cause inflation to cause a universe to expand outwards faster than the speed of light? Oh, we have no idea. What would cause it to slow down to its current linear expansion? Oh, we have no idea. Inflation is the best that the secular community has got, and it involves supernatural. In other words, you can't use laws and physics of nature to explain the starlight and time problem from the atheistic community. So if it's a problem, even given billions of years, then obviously we're going to admit that, okay, yes, we have a problem as well. We just want the secular community to admit they have just as much of a problem. All right. So we've got several potential solutions, and I'll go through a couple of them. Inflation, that one's full of hot air. That one involves supernatural, and it's not good science. Anisotropic light synchrony convention, we'll get into that. Gravitational time dilation, dasha, or rapidly matured. Mature creation, light in transit, the value of the speed of light's not constant, and the distances are not correct.
Wow. These are actual like creation arguments for understanding all this. How we can see this light.
Except inflation. And of course, there are more from the secular community as well, but most of those are from the creation community. These are all different ways to address the problem. So it's like, okay, we've got a plethora of solutions here that we just need to study and figure out which is the most plausible. But Eric, I might suggest that here in a few minutes, we're going to find out that why do we have to pick one? All right. This is where it gets really exciting. So I want to talk about the first one, and I kind of want to dispel a couple of notions. That's mature creation or light in transit. And, Henry Morris, legendary in creation, said, well, God created everything mature at the end of creation week. It was mature, it was all in place. And I would agree with that. But actually, I think it's more likely that it was rapidly matured. And that's really important to consider. Okay, then some people would suggest they would take that idea and they would say, well, why couldn't God just stretch the light in transit as he matures creation, and it ends up billions and billions of light years away and hitting planet Earth at the same time? Basically, starlight is mature from day one. That would have immediately connected the starlight from the farthest distances, the cosmos, to the Earth. And then maybe God created God set the laws and motions of physics in place that set us on a sustaining, slight linear expansion, where light is now traveling 186,000 miles per second. Okay, while this is biblically consistent to believe that the universe was rapidly matured, if you think about the idea of light in transit, that does have some difficulties. And my colleague, Dr. Jason Lyle, and I know he's a friend of yours as well, he talks about this light in transit notion. But I want to show you a picture that I took through one of my telescopes. This is the small one back here, but one of my larger telescopes, I took a picture of M51, the Whirlpool galaxy. And this picture that you see was taken just before May of 2011. Well, there was a supernova that took place late May of 2011. It was called supernova SN 2011 DH. And look at the yellow circle right here. This is before May of 2011. And then I took this picture late May of 2011. You see the spot up here.
Wow.
That's a supernova. That's a star exploding in the Whirlpool galaxy, which of course we think is about 30 million light years away. So even if this supernova took place the very first year of creation, 6,000 years ago, well, it should take 30 million years before I could take that picture through my telescope.
Exactly.
All right. If you believe in light in transit, then God is basically fooling us. He's playing with our minds. The explosion never happened. The star never existed. God just put an image of a supernova into a light beam about 6,000 years ago so that in 2011, boom, I would be able to see that exploding star. That's kind of a tactic of Satan. That's not typically something you see with our Creator, with God. So that's the reason I say that light in transit as a solution is not enough by itself to explain the dilemma.
That is interesting, because again, if I were the atheist, I would be saying that. How are we just now seeing that supernova? If it's 30 million light years away, yeah, that happened 30 million years ago, and we're just now seeing it in 2011. So in BC, 30 million years, actually 29 million, whatever. That's when that actually took place, and now we're just now seeing it today.
Yeah, and Eric, another thing that atheists will bring up is they'll say, if this idea of just stretching the starlight took place to get 30 million year starlight in only 6,000 years, then you would probably see a massive red shift, so massive that you wouldn't even be able to see the stars and galaxies to start with. So that's another really, really peculiar thing that the atheists come up with. And they'll say, so light in transit doesn't work. You can't just stretch out the starlight and not leave some evidence of it being stretched.
Do we see any, because that's one of the solutions, and I don't know if you're going to talk about it, one of the solutions I've mentioned before, the Bible says God stretched the heavens. Do we see, I don't know, maybe if you're going to get to that in a minute, just tell me, hold on, but do we see this evidence of God stretching the heavens? That's mentioned several times in the Bible.
Yeah, it's mentioned about 17 times in the Bible, and it's really interesting the way it's phrased, because it's like, well, he stretches out the heavens as a curtain, he stretches them out as a tent, he stretches them out like a fabric, he's going to roll them up as a scroll at the end of times. It's like all of these references to almost a fabric. Well, Einstein, pretty brilliant fella. Yeah. He said, he came up with this idea that what if we were to explain the universe as almost like a fabric of space and time that has been stretched Okay. It's like, wait a second, don't we actually see these references in the Bible?
Somebody came up with that before you, buddy. That's right. Yeah.
And I do actually touch on that in my second book. I go into the stretching of the heavens. Here's the thing, there's several different interpretations. Okay. Do we think that the stretching took place in the beginning, or do we think that the stretching is the current linear expansion of the universe, or where did this stretching come into place?
Because right now it still looks as though the universe is expanding.
Correct, because of the redshift. So you can look at stars, and while certain stars and certain galaxies have a blue shift, which actually means it looks like they're moving towards us on the fabric of space-time, some big galaxies that are fairly close by cosmically look like they're headed this way. And so that's a little bit alarming, but it's not a it's not a problem if we have the Christian perspective, because we know God's going to take care of everything. He's going to call it all to an end before that happens. But for the most part, the galaxies that we see out in the distant reaches of the cosmos have a red shift. It's kind of like, think of Doppler shift. If you're listening to an ambulance going down the road, all of a sudden there's a shift in the pitch, in the frequency of the ambulance's siren. Well, same thing happens to light. Light gets stretched and compressed, whether it's moving towards us or moving away from us. You can see lots and lots of galaxies look like they're moving away from us. And that's something that Veso Slipher, a famous astronomer using the Lowell observatories in Flagstaff, he measured this in something like 1917, I think, was the very, very first. And he thought, when he saw that, he was like, well, hang on, it looks like the galaxies are randomly flying away from us. And he didn't grasp the concept of the fabric of space-time that Einstein came up with in the 1920s. And Einstein came along, and Hubble, by the way, several other people, and they said, well, hang on, it's not just galaxies randomly flying away from us. The whole universe, the fabric of space-time, is getting stretched out, and with it, the distances to the different stars and galaxies are getting stretched out. So some people say, well, hang on a second. Maybe the distances aren't correct. Maybe distances to stars and planets and galaxies are simply fudged. Maybe that's something we've been fooled on. Maybe NASA doesn't know what it's talking about. Maybe the astronomers, astrophysicists, cosmologists, they don't know what they're talking. Now, I would say that's a little bit naive. Now, not that it's perfect, but we can measure distances to stars in several different ways. Stellar parallax is probably the most popular. That uses trigonometry, basically, and you can utilize a fairly careful distance based on trigonometry from Earth to, let's just say, stars within our galaxy. Once you get beyond that, it becomes a little bit more tricky. But by comparing spectral colors and the average brightness of stars of known distances, then we can come up with something we call standard candles, basically. And that means it's very complicated, but basically stars much greater distances away, we measure those distances based on what we know stars of known distances, the brightnesses of stars of known distances closer to us. Well, then you calibrate all of that to extremely bright pulsating stars, the stars that are basically pulsing light. And those pulses come extremely regularly, and they're extraordinarily bright stars known as Cepheids. And so you can measure that pulse of light and the brightness of that light. And then you can find these same bright pulsating stars in extreme distant galaxies, billions of light years away. So then you can figure out those distances pretty accurately. The fourth way you can do this, Eric, I mean, I know it gets really complicated, but you can also take the rate of a supernova, the rate it dims after it explodes. So that picture that I showed you of the supernova taking place in M51, the Whirlpool Galaxy, I only had a couple of days to get my big telescope all calibrated, to pray for a perfect weather, to pray for the perfect night, and to align it and pray for perfect focus and try to capture that picture I took, because that supernova is so far away, even though it's extremely bright, it dims out to where you can't even see it within days. Wow. And you can actually take that and you can determine the distances to stars. So here's what I'm saying, Eric. The distances to stars, they may be off slightly. They can't be off enough to explain the starlight and time dilemma. They're pretty well known.
That is interesting because that's something I've always said, and Gary in the chat actually said, hang on, do we really know how far away these things are? I mean, is there absolute clarity? Would you say there are still some assumptions that go into it, even with the candle power and things like that? There's still some assumptions that go into the methodology they use, or would you say, no, Eric, this is pretty solid science?
No, it's not perfect at all. There are still some assumptions that you do use, but consistently, all of the different methods that you use, and this is not like radiometric dating where you're always using radioactive decay. No, these are a bunch of different types of methods, and they all seem to indicate some stars and galaxies are millions and billions of light years away. Even if galaxies were several thousand times closer to the Earth than we do measure them to be, it's still not going to be sufficient enough to solve the problem. So to flat out dismiss the general distances, not that it's perfect, but to flat out dismiss general distances of millions and billions of light years away, it's kind of like denying operational science that's testable, repeatable, observable, empirical, via multiple lines of study. So I don't think that saying, hey, we can't really accurately measure the distance to the stars, I don't think that's going to solve the problem.
Got it, because I've heard Christians do that, say, well, they're probably not really that far away. But you're saying, hey, even the ones that we know these, using the hard science, we know these, there's not a lot of guesswork on these. Even those are outside of our 6,000 years time frame for the age of the Earth. So either way, we have to deal with the issue.
Yeah, either way, we have to deal with the issue, even if we're off by many factors, even if it's not nearly as far out there, it's still going to be an issue. There's no way to compress it down to where it won't be an issue. So that's not a good solution. Now I want to get into the nitty-gritty, Eric, of what I think are the really good potential solutions. And number one, this is something that my friend Dr. Danny Faulkner, PhD in astronomy, wrote the foreword to my first book. Brilliant man. He created what he calls the Dasha theory. And that sounds real fancy, but basically think of it like matured creation. We talked about mature creation a few minutes ago. Think about it like matured or rapidly matured creation. So in the creation week, we read multiple times that God created the heaven and the earth. And there's two different Hebrew words used there, bara and asah, basically translated created and made. Well, bara in Hebrew basically means ex nihilo, out of nothing. And that seems to be something that only God can do, right? We can't create something out of nothing, but God can, right? Well, asah, that Hebrew word, we can do that. We can fashion things out of existing material. Well, on day 4, God consistently uses the word asah, which means that he created the matter for the stars actually prior to day 4, if this theory is correct, okay? Well, that's super interesting. But the first law of thermodynamics basically tells us energy can't be created or destroyed. Einstein comes along. He said, well, matter is just an expression of energy, so matter can't be created nor destroyed.
This has been a presentation of Creation Today and has been made possible because of the generous support of our creation partners. To learn more about how you can partner with us, visit us at creationtoday.org/partner.